All right. Good afternoon. My name is Denaja Pendergrass Thomas, and I currently serve as the director of the Placement Exchange. It is an intentional partnership between AKU Hawaii and NASPA. I am glad to have you with me this afternoon and look forward to some conversation and sharing more with you about this new horizon, this new direction that TPE is going in. If you feel comfortable so that I can have a bit of an idea who's with me today, just throw your institution or your organization in the chat for me. That will help me think about what might be relevant to your school or organization as we go through the presentation. All right. Hello, TCU. SUNY at Buffalo. All right. Polar opposites. We've got a little warm-ish weather down south, and Buffalo just got through some snow. Florida State. Good to see you. Wonderful. Well, glad to have you with us. Very briefly, just want to talk to you a little bit about the background or overview of TPE. I never want to make the assumption that anyone has been in the field long enough to know our history or our origin, but TPE has been around more than a decade. There's some nuance to what it looked like more than 12-ish years or so ago, but it has been known specifically for being the go-to or the definitive place where job seekers and employers went to match. So for job seekers to find that first job or that perfect fit, and for employers to find their good match with a candidate. It was held the week before NASPA, so it was an in-person, on-site conference that happened leading right up to NASPA. So many of you have probably worked with folk or in your own experience have spent almost 2 weeks in the NASPA space, 1 week recruiting, a day or two to rest, and then transitioning right into the learning and professional development opportunities at NASPA. So that does mean that TPE has been all over the country, from Boston to Philadelphia to LA to San Antonio, and a lot of other cities in over a decade of providing this service to our profession. We are home supported by AKU Hawaii, which is the Association for Campus Housing International, and NASPA. So TPE really is autonomous in that we exist to serve the entire profession, right? But somebody has to be our home base. And so NASPA and AKU Hawaii have partnered together to be that for us. And so as a director of TPE, that means that I am a part of 2 staff teams. So I attend and support NASPA staff meetings and projects, and the same for AKU Hawaii, and they support TPE, vice versa. In addition to me, I have a partner in crime. His name is Spencer. His full-time role is to be the educational program manager at AKU Hawaii, but he's also had a lot of experience with TPE, and so he supports me in the customer service that we provide to our job seekers and employers. He's a conversation partner about our strategy and marketing plans, and he also helps me out in our work with the TPE committee. So a little bit about how we got to where we are is what I call a process of shifting. A lot of conversations that I've had would have people assume that TPE has made some of the changes that we have solely because of the impact of the pandemic on our field. And while the pandemic has had an impact on the workforce and the employment landscape of our field, that is not the sole reason for the direction that TPE is headed in. And so again, like I said, I'm visual, and this slide for me tells a bit of a story. And so on the left-hand side, I am not screen sharing. I apologize. There we go. On the left-hand side, the visual that I hope you'll see is, there we go. A couple of images. The first is like a busy crowd kind of moving in a chaotic space. The second looks like some folk potentially waiting for their opportunity to tell their story or interview. The third, right, we've seen this image sometimes around equity and equality. And then the last is an image around accessibility. This captures some of the stories that I've heard when we ask people about their experience with TPE. My first experience was in San Antonio, and if you happen to have been there, TPE was on the ground or basement level of the convention center, and I will never forget coming in as an employer and coming down the escalator, and you could see this sea of people and booths set up, and you could also see the waiting areas for job seekers, and so there were hundreds of people grouped A through M, N through S, T through Z. And they were all just sitting there waiting for this opportunity for their name to be called. And you could see people traveling this maze of aisles to find their place. And so when we got some feedback, particularly from job seekers around their experience, they talked about it being one of thousands and feeling like a sea of people everywhere and not necessarily knowing your place, where or how to feel, or being confident that you were even able to stand out. And so, right, when we think about how relational our field is and the importance of interpersonal connection, a lot of the feedback from our job seekers was that it was very overwhelming, very intimidating, and actually really hard to make that connection. If you imagine talking to two interviewers trying to tell your story and answer questions, and less than 6 feet to the left or right of you, someone else is doing the same. And likewise, if you are a hiring employer and you have any sort of susceptibility to distraction, or if you're like me and have some neurodivergence, trying to focus on a candidate in front of me while listening to my counterpart do an interview and watching someone two booths behind me do an interview could be a bit of a distraction. And so when we talk about accessibility, it may just not be physically, can you walk into this space? It is, can you interview or could you interview in a way that allows you to be fully present, to have as few distractions as possible, to not have any barriers to speech or understanding or communication in that way, coupled with the idea of so many people moving in so many spaces, along with the financial impact of being a part of an in-placement in-person experience. It was expensive for our students to figure out how they were going to pay to get to TPE. We had a lot of folk tell stories about getting their first credit card or taking out an additional loan for their spring semester to cover getting professional wardrobe, the need for travel, hotel and lodging, and a couple of other things that would be necessary to participate in TPE. In the same way, on the employer side, some of our smaller colleges, our community colleges, didn't necessarily have the recruiting budget that would allow them to be at in-person placement, or when we looked at the options that were available, have equitable access and opportunity to the way that they were able to present their team in their campus during the in-person placement. So those were all factors that we were considering when we thought about what it would look like for in-person placement to move forward in the virtual space. In the same way, some things were happening in our field. We've had conversations around compassion fatigue, staff burnout, the ways in which student affairs staff are highly accessible, respond to crisis, and interact on our campuses in ways that can just take a toll depending on the work that you're doing. Also, lots of conversation around career aspiration, the ability to move up, that requiring being able to go to another state or stay where you are to do that. Our economy is in a recession, for lack of a better word. And so the cost of living, what's necessary to have a comfortable, not affluent, but just a comfortable lifestyle, coupled with student loan debt and other concerns. This new impact and emphasis on employees and individuals wanting to know the ways in which they are an important and connecting part of the team of an organization is an emerging trend. And then, of course, now people are looking for jobs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our field was normed in that you waited until the spring to interview for a job. You started that job July 1, and that was just kind of the cycle that we stuck with. Now, student affairs looks a lot like other fields in that people are looking for jobs as much as they are in August, as they are in April or in July or in February. So while there are some ebbs and flows, I don't think we can necessarily hold off on depending on a one-time opportunity for placement. So it really was and is a process of shifting, and TPE thinking about how do we speak to all of these emerging and somewhat ongoing issues in a way that's going to be most impactful and meaningful to our field. So we pulled together a small task force. In the language of task force is simply because they weren't going to be with us forever. They had a very specific aim and a very specific timeline to do that work. And so we pulled together folk who have been hiring managers or recruiters at TPE, individuals who have sought out a job through TPE, been hired through TPE, practitioners who serve on diversity, equity, and inclusion on their campuses, and then other senior level professionals who are in our field who have seen the longevity of hiring and recruiting in student affairs. And we asked them to look into three main questions. How do we recruit? How do we hire and retain our staff? Why do we do it the way we've done it? And what's that impact in terms of effectiveness and satisfaction on our current practitioners if our goal is to have a healthy and vibrant workforce? So these are some of the observations that came from their work. We've talked about the first one. When it comes to brand recognition, most people call TPE the in-person event that happens in the spring. Beyond that, once per year is no longer the standard practice for hiring and recruiting in our field. Also, the job seekers and employers alike are looking for resources to understand the HR development and process that works in our field, and that there's no centralized hub. There would like to be one, but right now there's not a real centralized hub for year-round access to resources, learning, and development when it comes to the career services and human resource side of our profession. And so I want to be clear that we're not talking about hiring managers turning into HR reps. But if you look at any of our competencies or standards, there is the expectation for certain learning and development in this area around human resources. And so that's supervision, that's training and development, but that's also understanding our recruitment, hiring, and retention practices in the field. And so it is a special note that while we were doing this work, our employers were not shy about letting us know that whatever the outcome was, they're looking for a quick move from TPE to continue to help them fill some of the gaps and vacancies that they have. And of note, that a lot of our employers felt like or feel like the return to in-person placement would be a viable solution to some of the challenges that they're having or were having with their hiring process. So we asked, what are the needs for professionals to successfully gain and advance in this field? What are the needs of employers to successfully recruit, retain, and advance in their practices? But we also want to know what will help them improve and evolve. There's lots of feedback around, people say the way that we have done things is not the way that we should continue to do things. That's fair. But what do employers need to do this improvement and this evolution of their current practices? And then lastly, what are the resources that your associations, right? ACUHOI, NASPA, TPE, what is it we need to offer to serve the profession when it comes to career services, the recruitment of new professionals, and then the advancement and retention of our current professionals? We learned a lot, and we had to intentionally think about, right, we can do some things, we cannot do everything. And so the task force really took some time to think through what is it TPE can offer that would be helpful and beneficial to the profession. And here's where they landed. We kept it in the area of professionals, employers, and our associations. For professionals, we can get back to offering some stronger mentorship and coaching opportunities, learning opportunities. And then for this incoming generation, some help around building networks and networking. Yes, the pandemic has had some impact on the opportunity to have a lot of in-person interpersonal connections, to meet folk, to learn more about our field, to know how to engage in some light conversation. But in general, learning how to build a network and networking is a strategy. And so where do emerging professionals go to learn this strategy and work on how to cultivate that? And for employers, they are always looking for guidance, resource, and tools, right? Where are the best practices? How can I think about how that applies to my campus? And then what tangible tools as a hiring manager can I take away to apply to my processes or update my processes and use fairly quickly? And then a larger, more diverse candidate pool. I think that's fair and accurate feedback from our employers. Employers have vacancies and they want to be able to fill them. And so, yes, while resources are helpful, excuse me, employers are really looking for TPE to do the work to help them have more scope and depth to the candidate pool. And then lastly, employers are looking for the means to be competitive. This was an interesting piece of feedback when we looked at what they meant by the means to be competitive. And so that meant for some folks, resources to simply recruit, the ability to go into spaces and to offer positions, meet candidates, talk and share, be at an event like TPE. For some, it meant we actually need money to come from somewhere to increase the salary that we're offering for this position. When we look at comparable schools, we think we're missing out on candidates because our salary offering is not competitive. For others, it was, how do I tell the story about the full compensation package? I know that we have retirement and tuition support, health programs, and other benefits. How do I think about packaging that and explaining it in a way that shows that holistically we're competitive as an employer when you look at the full scope of our package? So a lot there when employers say that means to be competitive, it did not just mean the ability to increase the salary for every position they're hiring for. And then from associations, a bit more clear and direct communication about the purpose of TPE and how we can best serve the field. This is a quote that came from one of the working sessions of the task force that I have intended to share in this presentation because it really was the point of pivot for us. We had been having a really strong conversation about need. And in that particular session, the task force member talked about, we don't want to get in the rut of overlooking all of the factors that may have contributed to where we are by just throwing more solutions and more fixes if we really need to think about our foundation and the core of how we do this work and why we do this work. And so I will summarize the statement just a little bit. And it's just that our field can have a habit of telling war stories about some of the scars that we carry. And in telling those stories, it can suggest, right, that that is the way this works. It's always the hard way. It's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be a battle. And so you just kind of have to accept and concede that that is the way that it is. And so this person said, we can't just blame folks who've been doing this work for 10, 15, or 20 years, because that's not what I'm seeing. I'm already seeing that we have early career professionals who come into this field prepared to overwork in a sense, or to prove that they can carry these battle scars. And so we shape our processes and systems to perpetuate that. And so if we're really trying to think about TPE supporting a thriving and healthy workforce, the actual process for engagement in TPE should offer a counter narrative or a counter way of being when it comes to going through the recruitment and job search process. And so that caused us to pause, to not jump all the way to the tool side, right? What are the handoffs that we can give people? To back up and say, TPE has a tagline. We don't have or did not have an actual vision or mission or way for which we intend to do this work and why we're going to do it this way. And so the task force backed up and we did some work that helped us come through with a set of guiding principles, a new vision, and a mission. And then we decided, right, once you have your foundation for why we're doing what we're doing, what is the mindset that's going to guide that work? And for us, we wanted to look at the fact that we intend for this to be a people-centered process. When we look at industrial and organizational psychology and behavior, they are telling us that people-centered processes, people-centered work environments are showing direct correlations to healthy retention and advancement of their staff. An emphasis on well-being and prioritizing innovation. And so I'm going to share with you our new values and our vision, but I hope that you hear in what we present beyond this, that there is an emphasis for us on being people-centered, prioritizing well-being, and a commitment to looking at practices that will be innovative for us. And so out of that, before you give people tools, if they don't have the necessary skill to use those tools, we've still done a bit of disservice. And so you'll hear me talk in just a moment about what are the things that we need to offer for people to learn and to build development and confidence, those skills, and then what are the tools that will aid in people building those skills. So here's our new tagline: transforming the way that we recruit, hire, retain, and advance the workforce in our field. Our guiding principles are, we've heard it, innovative practice. We are really looking at industrial and organizational behavior and psychology and its impact on human resources right now to think through and to guide the things that we offer and recommend to employers and job seekers. The next piece is the cultivation of global knowledge and learning. TPE does not seek to take the place of your campus human resources office, but we can give hiring managers tools to take into the conversations to equip you to think about how do you build a strategic conversation or partnership with your HR rep so that it's more than just sending the email to request for a job to be activated. And pulsing, a lot of employers just didn't have the awareness that it's worth having an annual meeting with your HR rep to talk through your staffing needs, to review your position descriptions, to look at the salary that you have for staffing, and to think through a strategy to maximize the salary allocation that you have, the skills of your team, the positions that you have, and how you continue to revamp or adjust those to make the best use and show the best value add for your human capital, which is your staff, who we believe are your greatest resource. Advocacy and responsiveness. Again, there's some feedback that Student Affairs has watched a lot of things happen before we think about what we need to do or ways to be inserted to move forward. Our hope is that we will continue to read trends a bit quicker so that we can be a place that advocates on behalf of job seekers on what's healthy and beneficial in the search process, and likewise for employers. Again, those means to be competitive, the ability to network, the ways you need to work with your HR partners, and then a priority on justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. If folk don't feel like who they are can show up and do this work in their unique identity, then we're not going to be able to bring in the talent that we want. And if we do bring them in, we're going to have a hard time being able to retain them and advance them in the field. And then, of course, well-being of the individual and the profession. The philosophy behind this one for the task force, and it's one that I agree with, it's that if the person is whole and healthy, then the work will be good. Oftentimes, it's very easy to use a role or to use a person as a means to an end. But if you invest in the person that's doing the work, the statistics show us that the work will be well. If we overlook the person, if we don't invest in professional development, well-being, belonging, we will find that the work does not get done and we ultimately lose the person as well. So our vision is to provide an unrivaled service that inspires our profession to transform the way that we recruit, retain, and advance the workforce in the field. How we intend to do this? We want to drive it through connection, learning, and placement. And we want connection, learning, and placement that serves the full career life cycle of student affairs practitioners. And so when I say full career life cycle, I told someone very quickly, Spencer and I have talked about this. I want TPE to be the place that a graduating student comes to say, I think student affairs is the field for me. How do I find my first job? And they either find a job that lets them work while they get their master's, or they find the assistantship that leads them to their master's program. When they finish that program, I want TPE to be the place that they come back to do their skill building, to learn where the trends are, to prepare their written materials, to look for jobs, to interview and be recruited for their early career job. Likewise, 3 to 5 years after that or so, I want TPE to be the place that they come right back to when they feel like they're ready for that mid-level supervisor or manager role. And those resources that are available are still relevant, are still timely, and are still what they need to be prepared to be a competitive candidate. Likewise, when they're ready to be a director or an AVP or whatever that next level looks like, TPE, meaning our website, our resources, the job board, is the home, is the hub that people feel like they can come back to for the skill building and the tools that they need to be successful. On the employer side, we are hoping that through our site and through the areas that we talk about, it's the place that you check in with once or twice a year when you're ready to pull your committee together and do your development. Or it's the place that you come through when you're looking for a solid checklist to take to your HR conversation to make sure that you're working on your on a strong strategy for hiring your staff. A small note about equity, inclusion, social justice, and belonging. The task force made the recommendation to not create a new statement around that because TPE belongs to two organizations that have very robust statements and commitments to social justice, equity, diversity, and belonging. And so the task force felt that as long as we were upholding the expectations and the aims of both Aku, Hawaii, and Nashville, that we would be in good standing for the work that we're trying to do for the profession. So I want to take a moment and pause here. I've said a lot in about 25 minutes. And so I want to make space that if anyone has any questions or thoughts about the work that the task force did and the recommendations that they gave, I think you'll note that they're not very specific, but they are intended to be more of guidance and framework for how TPE moves forward. So I'll pause for a minute for any questions.
I noticed you said that they're more of a framework or guidance, but I would be curious to learn if there has been more talk about strategies to help those come to fruition.
Rachel, that is a perfect question. And I apologize to you all today. I have a little one who has given me some daycare germs. So forgive me if I have to pause to cough or sip water. So part of what I'm going to talk about are some of the things that we are working on, specific strategy, Rachel, that we think will assess or address and meet some of the recommendations that they've made. So since Rachel gave us a perfect transition, there are some new things coming. And so there's a new website coming. There's a new job board coming. There's a new virtual event platform coming. And we are also working with a company called Mechanic to help us with some new branding. Again, one of the first things I noted was that pretty cemented in people's brains that TPE is the in-person placement experience. We are never going to stop offering placement, but we intend to do some more things year round. And so to help people with some of that brand recognition, we're going to do some rebranding. So let's get into the details. The three focus areas that we are going to look at, again, placement, what everyone knows about, we're adding connection and learning. The connection piece is going to really focus on networking, coaching, and consulting. And that's the place where we think the community happens. And conversations that I've had with a few HR reps, they talk to me about the stagnant ways in which we market our jobs, right? And that's listing it with TPE or listing it with higher ed jobs. Networking is the more dynamic piece. And so that is, as a hiring manager and the people that you have on your committee or your institution as a whole, how do you engage in spaces where who you are becomes your brand? And so TPE offers, or will offer, continue to offer a series of talks, events, some things that are geared at telling a more positive narrative of the field. Some people will call that PR, but what we are working in relationship with is a lot of the articles in the Chronicle talk about the challenges that we're having. A lot of our articles in higher ed jobs and other sources talk about all of the challenges that we're having, and we know them. We also know that there's a large pool of people who are still doing this work. You're on this call. I was a practitioner in student affairs for 10 years before I came to TPE. I came to TPE because I believe in this work. Spencer was a practitioner because before he came to Hawaii, and likewise. And so, we can pay for an ad to say, come to TPE. We can also think about how we put narratives out there that tell the story of a worthwhile and a positive experience in student affairs. And so we're working on some things that we will publish and push socially and invite people to come to hear about the profession, about the work that we do, to hear from the practitioners who do this work and still find it satisfying, and aim to intend to stay in this work. The coaching piece for folk who are interested in doing this work and have questions around how to navigate being recruited and hired. How do you have access to a coach who doesn't just talk to you about large scale career planning, but can hone in on what we have identified as about 12 to 15 areas. If you just want to talk to a coach about your confidence in interviewing, if you just want to talk to a coach about how you craft a strategy to search for a job, to come out of a graduate program and say, I'm interested in student affairs, but your assistantship has only been in fraternity, sorority life, and the Wellbeing Center, there are about 20 other areas that you could go into. And where do you have access to learn about those, to meet people who do that work, and to hear their story, so that you can email someone or call someone and ask for an informational interview. That comes from networking. And so we're working on some intentional strategies to create networking opportunities through positive storytelling, through actual engagement spaces, and then offering the coaching piece to job seekers and the consulting piece to employers. The learning space. Some of that will look like DIY. We're going to create some content that is more standard, that doesn't need to be reproduced every year. And then webinars and talks. You'll hear me talk in just a minute about the TPE committee. They are a staple to the in-person event, and we are not letting them go anywhere. Even though TPE is moving virtual, I think they are what makes us stand apart and what I love about this work. They're a group of professionals who love this field so much that they're committed to helping us recruit and retain and advance staff. And so having a fresh group every year gives me a very good pulse from practitioners doing this work on what the needs are, what the trends are, what people want to talk about, and who the best people might be to have those conversations. And so we'll continue to have our annual webinars and talks around hiring practices, recruiting, and retention in the field. And then we are expanding into conference presentations. Right, the human resources piece is a competency in an area of assessment on our standards. And if it's an area of evaluation and people want to grow in their professional development when it comes to being a hiring manager, where do we provide these opportunities for that to happen? And so people are going to be at conferences. How can we provide this there without the need for additional registration costs, travel, or anything like that? And then, of course, placement. We are hoping with the virtual platform to offer placement more often. With this being virtual, it doesn't take 3 months to register and to review candidates. It can be a much quicker process, a much more accessible process, and it's allowing us to introduce career fairs, which is something a lot of other fields are able to offer. And so looking forward to the opportunity to say to graduating students, both undergrad and grad, if you're thinking about an opportunity in student affairs, join us for a career fair on this date, and they can come in, visit your virtual booth, learn about housing at Florida State, learn about conduct at TCU or housing at TCU, and get more of a feel for what the opportunities are in the field, not from us, but from the employers who will be looking to hire and staff their team. These are the content areas that we're going to hone in on. So when we talk about the networking, when we talk about the DIY opportunities, this is where we will focus. It's particularly around career discovery, networking, job searching, interviewing, how to navigate offers and onboarding, and how to have an intentional plan around advancing in the field. A lot of folk get into this field and they're not really certain around what advancement looks like. And if you don't have a supervisor who is skilled at doing that and has their own network to leverage to help you do that, planning for your own advancement as a student affairs professional can be a bit daunting. And so looking to offer some information and focus on that. I mentioned the coaching areas earlier. In terms of the independent learning, we don't intend to reproduce the wheel. There's a lot of information out there. There are lots of blog posts, there are lots of podcasts, books, and articles that are there. Sometimes you don't want to have to search 5 or 10 sites or places to locate those things. So we will introduce some new content, but we are also working to be a hub so that all of those things can be in one place for you to access. And again, we talked about the connected learning that we hope networking will come from. And so that's some of our webinars, our lectures, and our panels. And then we will continue to offer the resources and services for our job seekers, right? Those written materials, your cover letter, your CV, and then stretching into how to leverage your networking profile. So if you have a LinkedIn account or some other social profiles to do that with. And then the same for hiring managers. Those are those content areas. A lot of employers like, I'm interested, but how do I incorporate equity, inclusion, social justice, and accessibility? That could look like a workshop. That could also look like allowing a hiring manager the opportunity to schedule a one-on-one coaching conversation to look at what you currently have and think through the pieces that you need to pull together to get your staff and your team to where you want to go. And so that looks like consulting around that incorporating piece. We're talking a lot with employers around accurately telling your story. Candidates are looking for transparency, and sometimes it can be intimidating to say, how do I be transparent about the fact that we've got 5 vacancies? Well, it looks like an accurate Organizational analysis. And so how do you go through and talk about your strengths and growing edges? Accessibly name the plan and strategy that you're having to work on it, and then feel comfortable talking to a candidate about it so that I can go into a space and say, hey, Imani, we would love to have you join us at TPE. Yes, we are hiring 4 people for this position, but we want you to know that all vacancies are not from people who are departing. We've been able to promote a couple of people have made some lateral moves, and we've been approved for expansion and growth. If Monty says, that sounds wonderful, Denaja, I'd like to learn more, but I also carry some particular identities and I want to know what my quality of life or well-being might be like at TPE. I can say, wonderful. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're a pretty small city. So if you're looking for community in this way, you may have to find it in Winston-Salem or you may have to find it in Charlotte. But the good thing is one is within a 20-minute drive, the other is within a 45-minute to an hour drive. So it's just being able to talk about your growing edges, the values and benefits of your organization, the things that help folks feel connected and belong, like a sense of belonging, and talk about that with transparency in your interview and onboarding process. Position logistics. Our field right now is getting a lot of critique about the structure and the style of our position description. A lot of things are necessities depending on your HR, but in a lot of ways, other fields are starting to get away from just the responsibilities of the role and really talking about the characteristics and qualities that are needed for the role, more information about the dynamics of the campus, the team, the staff, and what an employee can expect from being a part of your team, painting a broader picture. And so what are some things that could be pulled into position descriptions to liven them and to tell a better picture of the position that job seekers may be looking for? Independent learning, it looks like the same for independent learning, connection, and then of course in resources, do you want a position description reviewed? We've got some HR partners, which is new for us, but we're excited about that. Do you want to have your screening and evaluating materials reviewed, have a discussion around those and ways and strategies to improve them? And likewise for your interview process and the questions that you might be asking. So I mentioned that I think the best part of TPE is still the TPE committee. This is the committee for this year. We still have a candidate development subcommittee, an employer development subcommittee, a marketing communications team, 2 individuals who are working with our ambassadors, which are our grad students. And then in the middle, we have Dr. Tim Layson and Chris Gillespie, who are chair and chair select. Excuse me. This group is having some very serious conversations that are helping me think through and helping us think through what we take from the task force and how it is shaped to actually roll out. And so we're talking about a lot of things and then we're doing them, but we're talking about the trends around advancement. That yes, we don't want to always plug our resources into bringing new professionals in the field. We want to think about how we keep the professionals that we have and that there's some challenges for folk around advancement. And there may be some ways that we can help employers and help the field think through how to broaden the options that are available for employees to move up and potentially stay local if that's a need or a desire. A lot of conversations with employers have been around being excited about the strategies that we offer and wrapping up by saying, Denaja, I am also not the decision maker. Who's having conversations with my AVP or my VP? And so we're working through how do we take the conversations that happen in a space like this or happen at the TPE Academy with a lot of our director level or assistant director level staff who are hiring managers and move it up to our AVPs and VPs who have a bit more of an impact on setting the tone and clarifying the expectation around how you hire, the transparency that you can have, adjusting your position descriptions and other things like that. The impact of supervision and professional development on recruitment, retention, and advancement. A lot of exit interviews and some of the work I think particularly that just came from Starbez and Sky Factor, the impact of supervision and professional development is high. And so, right, when we think about recruiting, retaining, and advancing, if we're looking at folk who are going to mid-level roles, the expectation is of supervision as a part of that role. What opportunities and development are there for folk to be prepared for it? So that the impact on retaining early career professionals is a high one, such that they want to be retained and advance in our field. And I think a big one, which most folks will probably have questions about, is the newer modified pipeline. Um, there's lots of conversations around how we get more people into the pool of candidates. And TPE is listening to all sides of that. There are some institutions who are adjusting the requirement for a master's to have certain roles, which means that they are able to reach out to graduating undergrad students. And so how do we get that word out? And make sure that undergrad students know there are some avenues for you to come into student affairs. Likewise, how to revisit the pipelines that we have with our graduate programs to make sure that our students who are getting master's degrees in student affairs, higher ed, leadership education aren't getting those degrees and going to tangential fields, but are coming into student affairs. And then the last piece, which is a bit more nuanced, is there may be some space in our field for people who come from other professional backgrounds, social work, communication, counseling, and the such. What does it look like to put out there that student affairs can potentially be a home for them if they are looking to make some different moves? We're talking about what employers gave us in terms of feedback from the past 2 years, and that includes an earlier timeline for being able to recruit and interview candidates. We talked before, people are not waiting to the end of March to find their next job. And so this year, TPE will be offered the 7th through the 9th of March. But our hope is to get a little closer to February for the spring event to help our partners out who are at quarter system schools and to meet the needs of job seekers who come back into their spring semester, particularly our students, and are already actively searching once they get into the spring semester. Some heavier advertising and incentive to candidates. I think the biggest incentive we could offer comes from being virtual is that there's no longer a cost to be a job seeker and participate in TPE. Now, we've heard from employers that they want to be sure that job seekers are committed to going through the interview process if they register. We're doing our diligence to set that expectation. And at the same time, we want to be sure we've eliminated as many barriers as we can to people who are interested in this field being able to come into the field and interview to get their job. More informal job fair sessions. We're excited that the virtual platform has that career fair aspect. And we're prepared to be able to offer it as many times as we can or as necessary. It's a feature that will allow us to do it by discipline. So if our friends in advising just want to have an academic advising career fair, that's possible. We can do things regionally. There are a lot of options and ways to now leverage the opportunities to have job fairs, recruit fairs, career fairs, whichever language you're familiar with. And then the need to engage more to highlight the benefits to have a stronger, larger pool. We really are listening to that. And that really just comes from storytelling and offering a counter narrative, which is one that we believe in. This is still good work. And there are lots of people that are still doing this good work and finding satisfaction in doing it. And then a significant review of what TPE virtual is to your institutions. Absolutely. And so what is great about this new platform, and I'll talk a bit more about it in a moment, is the convenience of it. No one is creating multiple Zoom links. I'm having to do outreach and communication outside of the platform. It really is a very seamless one-click process, and we're excited to be able to offer that. And then the last thing that we're really talking about as we move forward is what does an ethical and equitable and accessible staffing process look like in our field? And so it looks like being able to just understand the process. People talk about there being a lot of unspoken norms. And so if you don't know those norms, you're evaluated or assessed by them, but we don't know where they live or where they exist. And so how do we communicate a process that is somewhat of a standard and still unique to many institutions as necessary so that when candidates engage, they don't tell a polar opposite story from their interaction with FSU as opposed to SUNY Buffalo. More hiring manager training. A lot of people find out that they are the chair of a search committee or responsible for a search and there's no guide. And so if that's the case, where do you come in your first year opportunity to get the resources that you need to get started to be successful? And so the biggest thing for the committee this year has been their revamp of the academy. It used to be an almost 8-week experience. for job seekers only, that matched them with a coach and took them through a series of sessions or learning opportunities to prepare for in-person TPE. As we said, the process moves much quicker. And volunteerism in our field has changed. And so the time and capacity for people to mentor in that way just doesn't exist right now. And so the committee has done a good job through thinking around how to turn it into a 2-day workshop or institute format. And so it will be offered on February 2nd and 3rd in 90-minute workshop sessions. And so some of them will be panels, some of them will be presenters, but incorporated in that is the opportunity for job seekers to actually look at their materials or think through a strategy or craft a plan. And so the sessions for job seekers this go around are how can they use and incorporate their strengths in their job search process? How can they create intentional and convincing application materials? How can they utilize the recruiter fair to assess fit? And so I use fit very loosely because I know for some people it can bring up some icky feelings. But when we talk about fit, it's encouraging job seekers to visit employers or recruiters at the fair and ask questions about work environment, about supervision, about professional development, about values and mission vision alignment so that they can hear for themselves. It's not just the position description on paper that I'm looking for, but is this the type of environment with the type of supervisor and the type of team that I believe that I can thrive and be successful at? And then discussing transferable skills in the interview process. So helping our job seekers think through how do they pull out what they've done and name those skills that will be transferable to the position that they're interviewing for. For our employers, this is a perk. We never offered TPE Academy for employers in the past, but we found that we were having lots of guiding conversations with employers anyway. And so we have now incorporated employers into the Academy experience. And so it will look a bit different. It's just going to be 2 sessions, one on Thursday and one on Friday. The Thursday session is on the recruiter fair, how to promote your brand and manage your booth experience. So we're going to spend some time talking through the technical logistics of creating your booth for the fair, but then we're going to spend the bulk of the time talking through how do you situate your brand to stand apart from other hiring institutions? How do you tell the human side of your story, right? To be prepared for what candidates are going to ask. How do you say, this is the job, but this is what the job looks like here. This is what our team looks like. This is what cultivation, development, and well-being looks like. And this is how you will be able to see the impact that you make to this organization or this institution in fulfilling this particular role at our location. And then interview days, we'll talk through, again, the logistics of how to actually use the system and process, because we want people to have the opportunity to feel comfortable with it. And then actual strategies for how to successfully navigate the virtual interview space. We know everyone's done virtual interviews, and I'm sure people have gotten feedback. And so for folk who want to think through some of the current practices that are highly recommended or that other employers have found success with, we'll have opportunity for workshop and working time with those. Jobs at TPE, the new job board did launch on January 11th, which is huge for us. We wanted to make job searching easier for our candidates or job seekers. We also wanted to make it more engaging for our employers. Oftentimes employers posted a position and you were not able to tell who viewed it, did they click through? Can I connect with them? The opportunity to look at resumes and profiles was only reserved for the placement event. Now you are able to look at job seeker profiles throughout the year. So you could say, hi, Melissa, acknowledge you here at TPE. I saw that your profile was public. Your resume looks like you might be someone who could be successful in this role. Would love the opportunity to talk about you. So your job is up. Your dashboard can now give you metrics to let you know the views and the clicks that your job is getting, but you can also look at candidates and have that two-way engagement to say, would love for you as a candidate to take a look at the position that we have posted on the TPE job board. And then lastly, it's virtual. The career fair piece will be coming. We're very excited about that. It's highly interactive and engaging. Just to tell you a 30-second summary of it, it looks like being able to be in your booth as an employer and job seekers stop by to see you, you're in an open space, virtual space, to do what's basically like an information fair or session, branding, labeling, with spirit tags, all those things that kind of market your institution, and then space to tell your story. At the same time, be able to talk to a candidate, hit click, and go into a breakout room and have a conversation if they've got more questions for you or you have questions for them, to really explain who you are and what you do. So it's a great space for employers to be able to invite candidates who've already applied on your institution but are waiting to be interviewed, because it's not an evaluation piece. So you can kind of spotlight your institution once in that space. And then you're able to take notes on those conversations or the candidates that you've reviewed in their resume. And in one click say, hey, had a wonderful conversation with you. Would love for you to join us at interview days. And it will send a candidate to your schedule to sign up for the interview slot that you've created for them. So it's a wonderful opportunity to talk to the candidates that you've already identified, right? But the goal of a career fair is to also expose you to candidates who are searching that you may have not had the opportunity to find. So in both instances, you've initiated and candidates have initiated. And in that conversation process, you have the opportunity to look at all candidate materials and send that invitation for candidates to interview with you, during the 7th through the 9th. So you'll notice there is a gap between the recruiter fair on the 22nd, and the placement event on the 9th, and that is to give employers working time to look at the candidates that you meet on the career fair or the recruiter fair day, send those invitations, prepare your materials, and be ready to go into the interview days. So, like I said, I sped through a lot. I hope that you were able to hear some exciting things that are coming. Again, Rachel, hearing you saying, what are those strategies? We are taking a very large elephant and going piece by piece. We have chosen the technology piece first. So that was improving the job board and introducing the virtual event platform. We heard very clearly from employers what they don't mind being virtual. If we don't introduce a better platform, it's not going to have a strong value add. And so we have done some exciting work to get this platform done with Brazen and are very excited to launch it. The website that will be home to all of those resources and materials and access that I talked about earlier is slated to launch by June. And so then we'll continue to work through the next set and phases of things that will come as a part of our strategy. So that's it for my formal presentation. I will stop screen sharing. And open the floor to any thoughts or questions that you have. I'm happy to both receive feedback and answer questions as best I can.
Thank you very much. This is Imani at TCU. My question was, I know that I was on the website that launched earlier in January. So if we post that position now, will that also get us access to the recruiter day and the March 7th through 9th dates?
That's a really good question. And there's a newsletter announcement going out today, explaining the nuance a little better. The short answer is no, and that the job board now has that interactive piece year round. So I could see where that question comes from. I've answered a couple of times, so you're spot on. It will not count as registration for the career fair or their interview days, but that $100 increase in the price for your post gets you that two-way interaction with job seekers year round. So on that new board, you can look at profiles, you can reach out, you can interact. But when it comes time to register for the event, you'll be able to link it to that job post if that's the post that you want to use. But it will just be a separate registration fee for the career fair and the interview days.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions that I can answer for you all? Happy to do so. Well, okay. I will tell you, since you registered, we do have your contact information. We're going to send a copy of the presentation out to you. That way you just have a chance to read over it and share with your teams if you would like. If you find that you have any questions at all, my contact information will be included in that email that goes out to you. Please don't hesitate to send an email to me or to give me a call. We'll be happy to answer any questions, take more feedback from you about the direction that we're headed in, thoughts that you have, concerns that you have, or needs that you think need to be addressed that might not be on our radar, and the ways that you would like them to be. We are happy to take that feedback from you. So thank you for spending an hour with me this afternoon. I hope that you all have a good rest of your week, and look forward to seeing you soon.